I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. And welcome back. I'm your host, Patricia, and today I am sitting down with Gina Bonanno-Lemos. She's the founder and author of 360 Health Connection. You can find out more on her website at 360healthconnection.com. Welcome, Gina.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. I'm so excited to unpack. You've got just a prolific history. You have 2 books. You have a website. You offer all sorts of services, coaching and advising. I'm really excited to climb through everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yes. And for those of you listening, I will read a quick bio on Gina. Before I do that, a roadmap of today's podcast so that you know where we're headed for my inquiries. I'll first look at Gina's academic background and professional history as it relates to her vegan story and personal journey therein. Then I will start unpacking 360 Health Connection, the ethos and philosophy behind the impetus of that launch. And within that, I would like to get into her books. Gina's written 2 books, and it has a 3rd one coming out soon. What the Fork, The Secret Cause of Disease, 3 Steps to a Cancer-Free Kitchen, and the brand new ebook titled Fit After 40. I'll climb through those briefly and get like the synopsis and maybe some interesting threads throughout those. And then we'll turn our attention to the vegan training programs that she's offering through 360 Health, as well as other avenues. And we'll turn our attention next towards goals and advice. We'll wrap everything up with advice that she has for those of you who are either looking to get involved with her, follow some of her study, or even perhaps emulate some of her career success. A quick bio on Gina before we get started. Gina is the founder of 360 Health Connection, the award-winning author of What the Fork, The Secret Cause of Disease, the author of 13 Steps to a Cancer-Free Kitchen, and a brand new ebook titled Fit After 40. Gina is the creator of the Vegan Training Program, your plant-based guide, and she's currently in the process of creating a new training program specifically designed for women, the Ultimate Whole Body Reset. Gina is a dual certified in integrative nutrition and vegan nutrition, and has worked and shared the stage with world-renowned medical professionals and plant-based leaders, including Dr. Michael Clapper, Dr. Joel Kahn, Dr. Garth Davis, Ocean Robbins, Jean Bauer, Jane Valise Mitchell, and many others. And so some of those names may not mean a lot to people in the audience, and some of you may recognize them as the axiomatic pillars of kings and queens that they are. Gina, before we dive into all of your work and your research that you've done, unpacking all of that, I'm hoping you can draw us a brief academic and professional history that kind of sets the stage for who you are and what your brand currently is.
Sure. I first studied integrative nutrition at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and that really is it kind of embodies what 360 Health Connection was founded on. So it kind of marries all lifestyle aspects of health and wellness. So your sleep, your stress levels, how your relationships are with everyone in your life. It's not just diet and exercise, although it does include that as well. But it really focuses on the entire person, because we are really, and our health is really the sum total of everything that's going on in our life and every practice that we follow or don't. So that was a great foundation across the board and gave me, a lot of information and various subjects in regard to health. But I decided that I really wanted to focus on veganism and help people to achieve their goals more specifically in the way that I found my health. So that's when I went back to the Vegetarian Health Institute and I took their vegan mastery course. So got certified in that, took the portion of the course that allows you to get certified. And that was primarily taught, not solely, but primarily by Dr. Michael Clapper. He was the main physician, that provided a lot of the education. So.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering, so your career, we've kind of glossed over it very, very quickly in the bio and an explanation of the roadmap for today. I'm hoping you can kind of put things in a chronological sense before we start diving into some of the issues. Did you write your book? Did you develop the 360 Health Connection first? It's a website. It also has a lot of different elements to it, a lot of services and information. So which one came first, in which order? And then can you kind of tell us what the website has on it so that we can get a sense for and then climb into it?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I had started the site. I'd always really been into health and fitness and nutrition, but most of what I believed was what's out there in the ethos, what's popular
Yeah.
and that you see in fitness magazines and so forth. And so that's what I thought health was. So that's how I thought you were supposed to be healthy. You ate, lean meats and you exercised 5 or 6 times a week and so forth. And so it wasn't until my health really started going downhill. It really hit its peak. I've never been a really healthy person. I was always physically fit, but not healthy. That's when I stumbled upon veganism and turned my health around. And that's when I decided to go back to school essentially and get my certifications. So the website started first, but it really took a turn towards veganism and, really a focus on plant-based diet after I became certified and after my own health transformation.
Right. And I'm guessing because I have read What the Fork and The Secret Cause of Disease, and that chronicles a little bit in the beginning, and it's kind of sandwiched by these bookends of your journey. It's kind of placed within the format, if you will, and then all of it sounds like education, both formally and personal, has been like sandwiched in the body in between that. But since it chronicles that, I suspect that it came after 360. What year was 360 Health Connection launched? Do you remember?
I can't, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. That's okay. No, I mean, it's
Yeah,
clear that the book came after that. I think it's
yeah,
quite fascinating that you started this, this health advice and connection and then kind of let it evolve with, with your vegan journey and enterprise, because a lot of people do that backwards. They become
right.
vegan and then develop. So seeing that transition play out is interesting. Really quickly, looking at like unpacking 360 Health Connection, if I pretend I haven't been there right now and I hit your website, what are the first things I'm going to be presented with? Like, what are the different expertise, information, all of the different services that I will find?
Well, I put a large emphasis on new studies that come out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not a physician, have to be careful in giving medical advice. So I try to keep everything very factual and science-based. And so I always note where I'm getting the information, but I find it fascinating to read new studies that come out. So, I'm kind of a nerd in that way, but I'm constantly getting, alerts from Google and getting new information, whether it be about, how garlic affects cancer, things like that. So you're going to find a lot of that type of information. on either specific compounds in foods that prevent and reverse disease, or various studies, and there are some recipes that you'll find and some opinion pieces, but for the most part, it's going to be most of that scientific information and new stuff that's been coming out.
Absolutely. And then there's information about different training programs and things like that, right? Your own personal services. Are there other links? Like, how does it relate back to your brand?
Yeah, I actually have to update that. I haven't been working with clients one-on-one for quite a while. I
Okay.
I had launched my online training program, which was your plant-based guide. And then in 2018, I actually turned it into a live event, because people were saying, this is great information, but I would really like that in-person connection. So I held a big 2-day health conference in Costa Mesa, California.
Okay.
And
Was this in person or Facebook
yeah,
Live or okay?
I held it. I had it at the Hilton Hotel in Costa Mesa, California. And we had 2 full days. I had, I think, about 6 doctors that spoke, and then 6 or 7 other of us that also spoke over those 2 days. So a total of 13 presentations. But it was a huge success. Everybody really loved it. They got a lot of time with each of the presenters. We got to
Yes.
purchase their books and mingle. We had a dance party, stuff like that.
Excellent.
So
Yeah.
it was a big undertaking and very expensive. And
Hmm.
so, I'm kind of reimagining how I can do it so I don't lose everything if I do
Yeah.
it again. And so, right now I'm in the process of redoing the online training program for people who still want to take that,
Hmm.
but then also focusing on my new project, which, as you mentioned, is specifically more for women,
Yeah.
but
And
all
I'm
centered around a plant-based diet.
Yes, and I'm obsessed, and I'm very enthralled with. I have to say that your technique and how you approach all of your books, and it sounds like even your educational format on your website, as well as your techniques. As an old school academic, I really love being, thwarted with both personal opinion and backed up,
Mm.
scientific advice to merit that opinion, and to kind of cement it. And I want to climb through right now, What the Fork, the Secret Cause of Disease. I've talked a little bit with you off the record and then mentioned briefly here. I really appreciate the fact that it's this a great deal of scientific gathered information that are from the most like powerfully profound studies and correlations and causations and things of that nature, sandwiched, bookended, if you will, in your own personal journey and narrative. And so I'm hoping, if you will, really quickly, before we start getting into some of the questions or having you give us a synopsis of What the Fork, start us off with what that book actually begins with, which is your own personal journey, starting from childhood all the way up until this diagnostics of early perimenopause, at one point, and your friends meeting that brought veganism into your life. Can you give us a brief story, if you will, of your personal vegan story?
Sure, sure. Yeah. As I mentioned, I had always been somewhat ill, even as a child. I had a lot of ear infections, and I started, as I got older, getting sinus infections on a regular basis. And it definitely got worse after I had my son. I had him kind of young, and it just seemed to put a lot of stress on my body. At least that's what, doctors think. And so everything just got worse and worse, where most people grow out of allergies and asthma, mine kept getting progressively worse.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where I literally was having a sinus infection every single month, and I would joke with people that it was like having a period
Yeah.
because, they'd say, "Oh, do you want to go out Saturday?" And I'm like, "Oh, let me check the calendar. Oh, no, I'm going to be sick that weekend." And they'd laugh at me, but it was true. I mean, I literally could, count out the weeks and know, oh, no, it's going to kick back in. And so I was on this, perpetual vicious cycle of antibiotics, which of course made me worse and destroyed my microbiome. And, but I didn't know, of course, at the time. But it was just, I was spiraling. And so I was 41 actually when I was just miserable, and I had just had 2 back-to-back lung infections that were really severe. I was constantly using an inhaler or using a nebulizer, and I felt like I was rock bottom. I didn't know what to do. And as I said, I had always kind of studied health independently. And so I was doing all the right things, right? Chicken and fish and turkey, the lean meats. And I always had fruits and vegetables. So I thought I was doing everything right, all whole grains. But I went and had coffee with a friend, and she's about 20 something years older than I am. And I hadn't seen her in a while. And so when she ordered her coffee and didn't want cream, I said, "Oh, are you intolerant?" I was just thinking, dairy intolerance. And she announces that no, she had gone vegan. And by doing so, she had actually reversed her heart disease. She had gotten rid of her lifelong eczema. So this really, I had a mix of like thinking she was off her rocker, and then also like very curious about this. And then when she told me that her boyfriend had reversed his diabetes by doing the same thing, that really, kind of lit me up. So started researching, and the science was just undeniable. It was just, I couldn't refute it. It was just so clear cut. So I kept researching, and, I was kind of in and out. I tell people, it's kind of the hokey pokey with me, 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
But when I finally made that emotional connection, when it went from, yeah, I know I should do it, I know it's probably right, but, I always, as I always say, and I'm sure other people have said, when you want to do something, you'll find every way to do it and make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't want to do something, you're going to find every excuse not to.
Yes.
So that's where I was at. I was in the excuse phase, oh, my husband will never go for it. My kids will never eat it. It's, it's going to be too hard. And when I finally made the emotional connection due to the animal cruelty side of it, and that became part of my consciousness, that was it. There was no turning back. I didn't care what I had to do. So I found my way, and my health did a complete 180. So I went from one of the sickest people I know to literally 3 solid years without a single cold, flu, infection, nothing. It was unbelievable. It was like somebody gave me a new body.
Well, and it is such a remarkable turnaround, because, you have this instance you describe in the book where a doctor is just kind of paused with this like overwhelming moment of reading your chart, and you're sitting there contemplating what he's going to be saying next. Like, you have this rare disease, and he looks at you and says, "You're very allergic." And it was just this kind of understanding that you are allergic to everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And that was going to be something that played out throughout your adulthood. Have your allergies, have they taken a lesser role, or are they still prevalent?
Oh no, it's unbelievable. I had always been an animal lover my whole life. And because of my allergies, I couldn't have animals. I couldn't even go to someone else's house with an animal because I knew I would be sick, and it would culminate in a sinus infection. That was just the natural progress for me. So well, at one point we had 3 dogs. we just lost one a year ago, but so now we have 2 dogs and now a cat, which is unheard of because their dander is actually airborne. And so I couldn't even hug someone who had a cat before, because their dander is not only airborne, but it's sticky. So it sticks to your clothes and your hair and the walls and everything. And so if I even hugged someone who had a cat, I would be so sick. I mean, using my inhaler, down for weeks with a sinus infection. But yeah, this one, I mean, he sleeps curled up next to me every night. And it's Unreal.
Remarkable. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So looking at what the fork, I've had a lot of opinion and summary over it, just speaking with you
Mhm.
now. And I'm wondering how you, as the author, when you when you reflect back on writing it, and how would you describe how it's developed and the information it is conveying to your audience in a synopsis?
Um, my goal in writing it, because I think you always have to set, your goals and the expectations for any project. I wanted it to be fun, but factual.
Mm,
And I believe I accomplished that from feedback that I get from people. A lot of people will tell me that many books like this are so dry and hard to get through. So I definitely wanted to marry the both sides of my personality, really, because I have like a really goofy side of me that's like crazy and imaginative and kind of out there. And then I've
yeah.
got the grounded part that's factual and let's look at the facts here, ma'am. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I would say it's got both of those. I definitely wanted to let people see the science behind it and it not just be my story, my opinion. I wanted them to know that this is fact, this is science.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you don't just cover, I find that a lot of books written, and for great reason, are written just covering one industry, the slaughterhouse industry, the
Mhm.
agricultural industry, the scientific study research industry, the relationship to cancer and famous diseases and things of that nature. And you really include all of it. And it's done by chapter, it's not just the kitchen sink, but
Right.
you really do go through your personal vision with every single aspect that is in your life, from the
Mhm.
cruelty to the environmental impact to the great studies from the China study all the way through, Ornish and people that have done incredible studies, and much more obscure, smaller ones in between. And it's interesting because I feel like that endeavor would be too encyclopedic to handle,
Mhm.
but you've done it in a way that I felt very concluded with, and I felt very
Thank
much
you.
so. Yeah, and I understand your voice as well as a vegan. I think a lot of people think that it's those who love animals or those who want to help the environment. It's not this
Mhm.
collaboration, and I think that it's important. I want to climb now into 3 steps to a cancer-free kitchen, which I'm not so familiar with, and so I'm hoping you'll start off there with launching into what it is and what you were trying to convey with that endeavor.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's an ebook, and so that's on my website for anybody who goes there right now. They can download it for free. That will be replaced with the Fit After 40 ebook that's coming up. So the 13 Steps to a Cancer-Free Kitchen will be available for only a little bit longer. But really, I wanted to touch on not just a plant-based diet and let people know, yes, of course, you can, try to avoid or prevent and reverse cancer with a plant-based diet, but also the other factors, because part of my journey, and I referenced it in What the Fork, was that I was made aware of the Food Revolution Network and their incredible work that they do in their summits every year. And so there were so many things that came to light for me that I had never heard about in all of the fitness magazines and all of my travels all over the internet about toxins and other things that really we don't even think about, and they're poisoning us every single
Mhm.
day. And so I thought, let me just do, and I might write other books, ebooks as I go along. But, I thought, let me just focus on the kitchen for right now and what different things in our kitchen are lurking that we don't even know about. We're just not even aware, but we're using them, if not on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and they're affecting us. They're harming our children, our spouses, all of our loved ones. And with just simple tweaks, just simple changes you can make, and it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, those hidden factors. I think that'll catch even the most sage of
Mhm.
nutritionist or health advocate or anyone, those hiding, lurking moments. I just spoke with a vegan and 100% organic cosmetic line
Oh, nice.
distributor out of Paris. And he was saying the average woman by the end of her lifespan will have eaten 2 kilograms of lipstick. And if you
Uh,
research what is in most lipsticks, you would pass out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he became aware of this when his daughter was coming of age. But it's really true that, like looking towards the kitchen, I think even the most sage of us would have things that snuck in somehow, and we're not even aware of what they're doing and what they could be promoting, let
Right.
alone not helping to fight. And you talk in your book, I'll just quickly revisit What the Fork, because you do talk about these genetic switches and this propensity, these triggers of, you don't have to
Mhm.
be a product of your genetics, but you can definitely help not trigger things that
Correct.
may be in latent and things that have arrived from in utero that we're now studying and understanding.
Right.
But that linking back to those things being in the kitchen without us knowing, and all of
Exactly.
those factors. So now I want to turn towards what you just teased about, and I don't know how much you're comfortable relinquishing. I come from a family of
Mhm.
writers, and asking them about their new publication is like getting the top secret codes out of the president. But we'll go there and try for you anyway. The new ebook is called Fit After 40, and you do have an emphasis towards women in this one. Can you kind of let us know? You're saying it's replacing 3 Steps to a Cancer-Free Kitchen. To what end will it replace it, and what are you addressing with that?
So I've seen a need for women in particular, because so much of what I've come across on the internet is just general nutrition information and general fitness information, and I see a lot of men especially giving this information,
Mm-hmm.
and it just doesn't resonate for women, and it doesn't help women, more importantly, because we have very specific needs. Our
Yes.
hormones are so different, so vastly different than men. And so, you and your husband can eat the same exact things, and, you'll gain weight and he won't, because of our hormones. And, here I am approaching 50, and it's that time, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I started to notice changes in my own body. And, I had a huge change, of course, from when I wasn't vegan to when I went vegan, but now I'm noticing more changes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really wanted to help women with that. I wanted to address their specific needs. And I also recognize the need to really reach women, because I believe that they are the heart of the home. I believe that they are really the ones who, at least I know in my home, I do this, and most of my friends are this way. We're the ones that bring the new information to our families.
Mm-hmm.
We're the ones who are more connected. And I don't know if that's because just as women, we naturally share more with our friends, where, men keep things more on the surface, and women talk more about their health issues and their life and their stress and, those deeper issues.
Mm-hmm.
um, as they say, we tend and befriend, or the men are like the fight or flight kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so,
So
yeah,
it
I
will
think
specifically address these hormone issues. Will you segregate it by age?
it's for women over 40. And
Okay.
so, as the title implies, of the ebook, so it all kind of ties together, the ultimate whole body reset. But it encompasses my early learning, really, with integrative nutrition. So it talks about things such as stress and sleep, and really, but it all really centers around the one core issue, that all of our health stems from. And there's like a feedback loop with all of these things with our microbiome. So really, that is the core of our health. as Hippocrates once said, that, our gut is where disease begins. There's a direct relationship between all of these issues that I started out learning about and our microbiome, our gut health. And so it is really the make or break of our health overall.
And those, yeah, I think that those are avenues too, to conversations. People feel like vegans, or they used to, is this island. You belonged on it or you didn't. And what I'm loving to see now is this blending of the conversation where we get brought in. I think that the Yoshi Institute with the macrobiotic diet that was largely vegan with the exception of some poultry. My own father did that when he was fighting cancer 15 years ago. And I think that these
cured her stage 4 cancer with it.
The macro, yeah. And the Yoshi Institute is the one that I'm familiar with, but it's powerful. It's got a lot of research behind it, and it's very akin to the vegan way of life. But I'm interested in these annexations, these moments and dialogues between issues or disease and then the vegan, diet and way of life and way of looking at things, because I think it's becoming less of an island and more of a peninsula. I'd like to get it back to the mainland, and that's all of our goal, one day. But I think just getting to that place where you open these dialogues about hormones, gut health that you mentioned, when I first started hearing about that back in 2017, when it was kind of getting into the rage, people were kind of promoting it. Doctors were really looking at the microbiome of the gut, like really getting into all of those kimchi, how do we increase it? What do we do? How antibiotics strip you of it, all of these things. Right. I remember there wasn't a whole lot of conversation about diet outside of like what promoted it. And a lot of it was around dairy, like, got to have that yogurt, that probiotic yogurt and different things like that. And so I think people linked it to the dairy industry, which is ironic because a lot of the studies that come out since have been in a very disparate relationship with the dairy industry and the microbiome. Oh, absolutely. And so to enter that conversation and get a seat at that table is crucial, because the gut health is in control of so much more than other than, Socrates and people like that hypothesized. I think that food as a medicine has been looked at by religious institutes for hundreds of years and kind of thought of in different ways. Stay away from this, eat more of that, like all the way down to diets in the 80s that were insane. And now we're still having that same conversation. Food is a medicine, food is the leader, but we're doing it in a very different way, and looking at the gut and things like that. And I'm curious, with all of your knowledge, you take in a great deal of in What the Fork returning, you kind of have this, you have narratives as to how politics play into it. Like I said, there is no stone you did not unturned, at least for me. And you talk about, the World Health Organization, you talk about our current, and this is in the United States, but you do talk about these world organizations on the whole, and subsidies and people that are all in all those places of power. And I'm wondering how you feel, given the current climate of the COVID-19 pandemic, what would you hypothetically looking at, given that you have this breadth of history with understanding how these different political climates have played in, what change do you see like on the forefront?
Well, there's what I'd like to see and then what I do see. I know that just about a week or two ago, Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren actually introduced a bill, and they are calling for the end of the majority of factory farming by, I believe it's 2040. I personally think that's too far away based on what we're witnessing with climate change. Factory farming, it accounts for about 25% of our methane emissions. So that's huge. It's more than all of our transportation sectors combined. So we really need to make that connection. And that's one of the reasons why I covered all of the topics in my book, because I found that in talking with people, what's important to me may not be important to you. I mean, that's the way it is in anything in life. But, like for my husband, he's much more focused on the climate change aspect of why he should reduce or remove meat, from his diet. Whereas for me, like I said, the health issue was the first thing that got me interested, but what tipped me over the edge was the animal cruelty aspect. But I also am a very big environmentalist. So, for me, it hits on all three points
Right.
of the positive reasons for going plant-based. Yeah, I was on a radio show recently, and as I told them, I think we're missing an opportunity here. I think that we can take this time, especially right now with COVID, to show people that you not only don't need animal protein in your diet, but it's actually better for us. It's better for your health.
Yeah.
We've seen now with people not moving about, transportation going down, with factory farming slowing, the emission levels have reduced. So there's clearly a human impact. It's clearly being driven by our actions. We have to start putting our health and the health of the planet ahead of our greed, ahead of our taste buds, to be frank.
Yeah.
There's an absolute there's a need for it, and I believe it will happen whether we want it or not.
Yes.
Whether it's something that we purposely do, or whether it just happens because we have no other choice.
And the legacy of that, I do want to say, I think that it will happen either way. One can be pretty and one can be really, really nasty.
Yeah.
And the legacy is only going to impact our children and our grandchildren. It's really about the empathy and compassion you have for your own kin. What we hand down to them, even this required taste of meat is unsustainable to have in their diet 3 times a day for 7 days a week. That won't be possible. And so giving them a desire for that is giving them an addiction to something they will not be able to have. That the lack of love in that exchange, I don't think any parent or loved one would want to inflict on the next generation. And I do think that it is in the mix, as do, the statisticians and people running these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious so here's my take. I was interviewing vegans globally, and I was in Australia prior to the pandemic breaking out in early February. It had broken out, but nobody was taking it seriously, certainly not in the United States, not to the sense of come home, shelter in place.
Right.
And I was interviewing a vegan restaurant owner, and she was saying, what I love is the change in this. She was the sage vegan. She'd been vegan for 40 years. And she said the vegan prototype is no longer a prototype. She said there's unlikely vegans coming out of all the woodwork. And what she meant by that was that there were so many people with health concerns, from allergies to heart disease, that were finding the vegan diet. And then within that, discovering that the diet was benefiting the planet and all of these other things, and then became these very unlikely evangelists about veganism. And she was like, it's these weird like stockbrokers that are coming in like, are you aware of how well it benefits? Like, you should promote that in your restaurant. And she said they're just like these people that would never probably have considered it in the past. And I kept talking to her about like these wonderful avenues that out of tragedy, unfortunately, were bringing veganism to the forefront. And since the pandemic, I have wondered if there would be this, kind of like reshift to like, we should look into that, and if there would be a relabeling of it because people didn't want to join that label, of veganism, if people would go to another area. That brought up the distinction between people calling things plant-based and things that are vegan. And I want to climb into that with you because, it's a heated topic right now, and for very good reason. There's an economical factor to it. There's an emotional factor. But for you yourself, how would you define the differences between plant-based and vegan, those terms?
I think me personally, I define a vegan as someone who really embraces the entire lifestyle. So, for example, I don't wear any animal products. I don't buy leather. I have things that I purchased in the past before I became vegan, So I'm not going to throw them out, and, because I think that's disrespectful to the animal that gave its life. So, I'll use those things until they no longer are usable, but I don't purchase anything new. If I buy a handbag or piece of furniture, or whatever the case may be, I don't choose. It has to be a faux leather, or another type of fabric. So for me, it's a whole, vegan means the whole lifestyle, right?
Okay.
It means that you don't exploit animals in any way. You don't go to a circus, or you don't go to the zoo. You don't play into that in an economic level in
Right.
any way. Plant-based to me is more just a diet, a dietary choice. And it can vary between people. I know people who are 100% plant-based, and that's great. And then I know people who are mostly plant-based, but they still purchase, leather shoes or whatever the case may be. They don't, for them, it's not, and I found that most of the people who are just plant-based and not vegan, for them, it's more so about the environment, or, wanting to stay healthier, wanting to
Right.
level up on their health and things like that. But it's not necessarily about the animal cruelty or anything like that. So that's what it means to me. But, I've heard other people with different takes on it.
Yeah.
I try to use just the term plant-based, because I know that it doesn't rub people the wrong way, the way vegan necessarily does. So, to me, it's like, it all means the same thing, basically. I mean, you're making better choices,
Mhm.
not only for you, but for the environment, for the animals, for, you
Yeah.
know,
I
yeah.
wonder about products that are starting to use the terms plant-based for things that aren't vegan. I
Mhm.
concern myself in this factor only because I love the written language and language in general, and how we define and clarify our terms. But um, I wonder about confusing and conflating things. Marketing is always a step ahead, any of our philosophy endeavors or anything else. And there's
Mhm.
been this acquisition of the word plant based to
Mhm.
include on packaging, just like fortified, with vitamins that began in the 80s. Let's fortify everything. And it's been acquired at an alarming pace, and it's been put on products that are both unhealthy, disease causing, and not vegan. And I
Yeah.
concern myself with, because most of my vegan colleagues and and warriors and people fighting the good fight and putting the word out there are very akin to
Mhm.
calling something plant-based, and I was as well, until I started recognizing that there were so many different products assigning that on their label. And it concerns me, because then we're going to have to do the same thing we did with vitamins, which was re-educate that nothing needs to be fortified that's naturally healthy.
Right.
When we strip it of everything beautiful, that's when you need to go and inject things back into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You're right. I've even seen them use the term plant-based on eggs. They say plant-based chickens. It's like, well, of course, they've always been. I mean,
right.
uh, actually, that's not true. There are some instances on
Fed.
factory farms where they feed them back, their dead chicken friends, diseased friends. So,
Yeah.
but for the most part, if you were to let hens and chickens out in the wild, they are plant-based. That's all they eat
Mm-hmm.
is,
Yeah.
seeds and grass and so forth.
Yeah. Organic,
Yeah.
naturally raised,
Yeah.
bottled at the source. Where else are you going to bottle it? Just like, I
Right.
can go on and on.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I sit with
Marketing
commercials
crazy.
and just think, what are you doing? But it's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, looking forward, and this has changed for a lot of people given the current climate, and for some people it's magnified their scope, and for others it's had a complete pivoting effect. But what are your future goals for the next 1 to 3 years? You're coming out with the Fit After 40, which I'm excited to hear about the launch of. And what else will you be working on for the next 1 to 3 years?
Um, that's a good question. So I really have felt like I'm being kind of torn in two directions. And it's funny that you mention in What the Fork how I bring up the issues around politics because, I do see so much in our country going in the wrong direction, as whether it be with diet or our health in our health industry in our country is just ridiculous. I see so much needless suffering
Yeah.
and so many changes that need to be made, and I just don't see fighters. And so yeah, I'm kind of teetering on the edge of, do I run for office? I have a friend who also was plant-based, she's also an author. She ran for Congress in 2018, didn't didn't win her seat, but she's now working for the man who did. And she's been pushing me because she knows that I am someone who is like a dog with a bone. I don't let up on things, and I fight. I care about people, I care about the animals and the environment, and
And you listen to the science. Yes, you
yeah,
should do
yeah.
it. I
And
endorse it right now.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough because I want to help people with the plant-based diet, but then I think would my time and my effort be better spent doing it by implementing laws and changing
Mm-hmm.
really the way things are going down, because I see all these people who are panicking, they're losing their health insurance, and yes, that is terrible and it's scary and it's horrible because there are so many sick people. And I just think, gosh, if they only knew what I know, if they only knew that they don't need that necessarily that medication. I'm not, telling anybody go off of your medication. You have to do what your doctor tells you. But there's so many other things that can be done.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned about the current climate that I was going to say, there have been studies done when we've been in times of war. And they've actually noticed that in times of war in the past, when meat consumption went down, just because we weren't able to manufacture enough, or people didn't have the money to purchase it and eat it on a daily basis as people do now, the disease rates mimicked. They actually, if you chart it, the disease rates went down, and coincided with the reduction in meat consumption. So
Mm-hmm.
sorry, that's I think my cat
That's
out
great.
there.
This another,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
so yeah, there's, like I said, such an opportunity right now for people to see that there's a better way. There are other things that can be done, and prevention is just so crucial. I always tell people it's so much easier to prevent disease and illnesses than it is to reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and two, like you were saying, people care so much about their families and their children, and you want to get toxins out of their life. And if people only understood that epigenetic component, because everybody thinks, well, my sister had it, my mother had it, my aunts, my grandmother, my father, whomever in my family, so I have those genetics. Yes, you have those genetics, but on an epigenetic level, it is literally like flipping a light switch. You can turn those on or off. And it's not 100% sure that you're not going to get it, but it reduces your risk so, so much.
Yeah.
And so if people just understood that one component and how it's related to a plant-based diet, I think everybody would go plant-based. If
I do too.
everyone, if they understood it's not about your genetics, you are in control.
Yeah.
You can control your destiny up to 90-95% of the time. Yeah, I think so many more people would make that switch.
The alleviation of suffering would create converts on the greatest scale as well. We have so much sickness in this country that it should at very least give it a shot. If you're going to try a new controversial drug that has more side effects than, the day is long, why not try the vegan diet for a month? Like what have
Exactly.
you got to lose? And I think that there's fear in one and there's ease in another. And
Mm-hmm.
that begins with education and accessibility and all
Mm-hmm.
of those things to that education. You know, these grassroots movements where my father suffered polio as a child, and
Mm-hmm.
he was around when people were still knocking on the door saying, have you vaccinated your children? You
Oh,
know, and eradicating our country of polio was like this grassroots effort where you had to reach people in
yeah,
rural communities, people who weren't dialed in and stuff like that. And so I think that educational platforms need to come from both grassroots all the way to high tech. And I think we need vegan lobbyists. You know, we got to get people like
yeah,
Joaquin Phoenix and people
yeah,
who are recently angry about like the tragedy and everything that's going on, pull our money together and get people in Washington that are willing to make it tasty and
right.
chic and exciting and get people to sign on to our doctrine as much as they are with the people that are, you know, controlling all these subsidies for dairy, eggs, and flour, you
Yeah.
know, and
Well,
those types.
one incredible group that is doing that and has done the most, I think, for all of us is Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And actually, Dr. Barnard is the one who wrote the
Mm-hmm.
endorsement on the back of my book. He's the founder of PCRM. So yeah, I encourage everybody to support their work because they are getting rid of animal testing in labs, but even more than that, they've exposed so much corruption. You know, as far as like the egg industry basically coming in and, you know, writing their own laws essentially,
Yeah.
and telling the public that it's healthy to eat eggs all the time, but yet they were the ones, the egg industry is the one who's conducting the scientific research that proves this supposedly. You know, and this is going on constantly, whether it be with our prescription drugs, whether it be with our foods, you know, additives that are allowed, pretty much everything, you know, that affects us on a health level. There is just such a revolving door of the lobbyists that, you know, push for these things, push for the corporate interests, and then they go and they get a job in the, you know, in the government, and then they actually are working to implement the laws. And, you know, and it's sickening. It really is sick.
Right. Yeah, it is. And
And
flipping
it's
that.
making us sick, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think realizing that paradigm, I'm an optimist. Despite how much I read, I keep that flag above my head, and I believe the day is upon us. You know, I think that we're here, and it is the day of health reckoning is here, and
Yeah.
it's about 1,000 years later than perhaps one would have thought when hearing the old philosophers talk about food being thy medicine and things of that nature. But we're here, and I do believe there is going to be a shift and an awakening, and it's going to cross the aisle. You know, I don't like Kramer at all. I think his stock advice is even a little questionable. However, if, you know, Jim Kramer is touting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this like meat alternative, this
Perfect
Impossible Burger,
Beyond
like all of those
Impossible. Yeah.
things. Yeah, doubling down. If
Mm-hmm.
someone as unlikely, let's put it, as
Mm-hmm.
him is touting it, we're
Yeah.
getting there. Like we
Oh,
are,
yeah.
this is crossing borders, we're crossing oceans. I can feel the annexation happening. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I'm
It's changed
wondering,
a lot.
moving forward, we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you, given that you do cover all of these areas, and to my glee, you're looking into political conference and things like that, and possibly considering a station therein yourself, I'm wondering if you can impart a few pieces of advice that you have offered or proffered your close community over the past few weeks, regarding the future, or things to look towards or change that's possible. Do you have an inner monologue or mantra or anything like that that you kind of keep going with?
Gosh, that's a good question. You know, yeah, I mean, what I really go back to is what I was saying is that I think women are the key. I think women bring so many new ideas to the family, and that's really key in
Mm-hmm.
getting more women in power. Um, you know, more women awake to these ideas, to understand that the choices you're making are not just affecting you, they are affecting your unborn children, even, going, oh, that's my dog. One of them,
Good.
going back to the toxin issue.
Mm-hmm.
They've done studies too, and they've found that even brand new, newborn babies already have, I forget how many hundreds of different toxins in their blood, and it comes from their mother's umbilical cord. So we're passing so much on to our children, more so than, our choices and our DNA.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, I mean, if you won't do it for you, do it for those around you. Because, having lost my mother in 2018 to cancer, and knowing that just with changing some of her lifestyle choices, she would probably still be here.
Mm.
I could probably say 99%, I'm sure that she would still be here. And I thought about her a lot in creating this new training program, because so many of the pieces and components and the different modules that I teach in it, if she had embraced these things, she would still be here.
Mm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I would just say, if not for you, for everybody around you. And, as they say, we're not living longer, we're dying longer. So we may be here on earth for more years, but how are we living? Are we enjoying those years?
Yeah.
Or are we spending them in a wheelchair in a hospital bed? So
That's
yeah.
interesting. I love that. And I love the emphasis that women are the key, and that kind of started this idea for you. And it's auspicious that we just passed Mother's Day. And I'm hoping that the legacy and the knowledge that you have, and the loss of your own mother, can go out and spare other people's, and it is the most painful part for me about discovering and speaking with expertise such as yourself. Is we talked off the record, but some of the most difficult, conversations I have on the daily are with these personal interactions with family and friends that simply don't want to have that conversation, and wanting to help without ruin relationships. It's a tricky dialogue. We are out of time today, Gina, but I want to say thank you so much. I know you're incredibly busy, and I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and sorry about the howling in the background.
Why? There's no other podcast they're more welcome on. This is a vegan situation. They should be in camera. They're probably upset with you for that.
I know.
Shame on us. For everyone listening, I want to say thank you so much for your time. We've been speaking with Gina Bonanno-Lemos, and she's the founder of 360 Health Connection. You can find out more online, 360healthconnection.com. She is also the author of What the Fork, The Secret Cause of Disease. She has an ebook, There's 3 Steps to Cancer-Free Kitchen, which will be replaced shortly with Fit After 40. I encourage all of you to jump on and look at her work. As I said, one of the best reads I've done in a long while, and I'm a bit of a nerd. Yeah. Thank you. And for everyone listening, thank you for giving us your time today. Until we speak again next time, please be advised by myself and my love and compassion. Stay safe, stay well, and remember to always bet on yourself. Sancha.